Well, good evening. In this third in the series of brief videos for UK Parliament Week, I wanted to discuss the legislative process and how a draft bill, which is a draft of a new law, becomes an Act of Parliament, which is an actual law. It's an incredibly important process as it ensures that all aspects of the legislation are properly scrutinised. Now, there are actually three different types of bill: public, private and hybrid bills. There are also private members' bills which are slightly different and are presented by MPs and Lords who are not government ministers. A minority of private members' bills ever become law. Bills can be introduced by the government, can be introduced by individual MPs or Lords or private individuals or even organisations. The majority of the time a bill will begin in the House of Commons. It's not always the case though. Sometimes a bill is introduced first in the House of Lords. But either way, however it is introduced and where it starts, the bill goes through the same stages of scrutiny each time. Just in Westminster Hall, by the way. Just a beautiful part of the world. If a bill begins in the Commons, it'll first have what's called a first reading, where it's simply announced and there's no actual debate. The second reading is then the first opportunity for the bill to be actually debated. This is where MPs discuss the general principles of the bill and are allowed to vote on it, meaning that there's a potential that it could be defeated at that stage. If it passes, the bill will be scrutinised in the committee stage. MPs from both parties will take part in that scrutiny. However, there'll always be a majority for the governing party on those committees. Amendments can be proposed at that stage, and although opposition amendments are unlikely to be successful, the government may well propose amendments to their own legislation if they think it needs tweaking and improving along the way. The bill after that will go back to the House of Commons for the report stage, which is basically just a review of the committee stage and the changes that have been made, and a chance for further amendments and tweaks and improvements to be made. Following that is the final stage, which is called the third reading in the House of Commons, which is basically just the summation and wrapping up to say that's it, this is the bill that we're happy to move forward with. The bill would then move into the House of Lords, where it goes through all the same stages as it did in the Commons. And if the House of Lords disagrees with the Commons, then they can amend it themselves in the same processes, and they can send it back to the Commons for checking and ratification. The Commons will then either agree or disagree with Lords' amendments, but crucially has the power to override the House of Lords in the Parliament Act and insist that the bill is carried through as the Commons decides. This is basically because many years ago the principle of the superiority of the Commons was established because the Commons are the elected representatives of the people rather than the unelected House of Lords. But for a bill to become law, both Houses of Parliament have to agree on its exact final form, which, as you can imagine, sometimes can be quite a long, drawn-out process, back and forth, quite a few times. But the Lords do always agree to the requests of the Commons, even if it has to go back and forth half a dozen times. And then once an agreement has been reached, the bill will go to the monarch, to the Queen, for royal assent, after which it becomes an Act of Parliament and the law. So the process that I've described there is to ensure basically that every single piece of legislation is properly scrutinised and that all aspects of the bill and its consequences, most importantly, are identified. It's a very historic process and one that is super important to our democracy. That's the passage of a bill and how it becomes law, and I will catch up with you next time for the next in our videos. Have a good evening. Take care.